ISKCON Ljubljana ki jai, Gangavani ki jai, Jumanavani ki jai, Srimati Bhakti Devi ki jai, Srimati Tulsi Devi ki jai, Shri Panchatakti ki jai, Shri Shri Gaura Nitai ki jai, Gaur Brahmanande, Slava Dharani Bhakti, Slava Dharani Bhakti, Slava Dharani Bhakti, So Shri Guru, Shri Gaurangi.
Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Shri Radha Madhava ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shla Prabhupada ki jai. Samavita Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Odstavi, može. Dobra ideja. V katerem jeziku bo potekala lekcija? English. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavat. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 7th chapter, titled The Son of Drona, Drona Punished, verse 43. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Uvacha cha sahantyasya. Uvacha cha sahantyasya. Bandhananayanam sati. Bandhananayanam sati. Mucyatam esha. Mucyatam esha. Brahmano nitaram guru. Brahmano nitaram guru. Uvacha cha sahantyasya. Bandhananayanam sati. Mucyatam esha. Brahmano nitaram guru. Uvacha cha sahantyasya. Bandhananayanam sati. Mucyatam esha. Brahmano nitaram guru. Prabhus.
Uvacha cha sahantyasya. Bandhananayanam sati. Mucyatam esha. Brahmano niratam guru.
Matajis. Uvacha cha sahantyasya. Uvacha said, cha and, asahanti being unbearable for her, asya his, bandhana being bound, anayanam bringing him, sati the devoted, mucyatam just get him released, esha this, brahmana a brahmana, nitaram our, guru teacher. Translation. She could not tolerate Ashwatthama's being bound by ropes, and being a devoted lady, she said, "Release him, for he is a Brahmana, our spiritual master." Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. As soon as Ashwatthama was brought before Draupadi, she thought it intolerable that a Brahmana should be arrested like a culprit and brought before her in that condition, especially when the Brahmana happened to be a teacher's son. Arjuna arrested Ashwatthama, knowing perfectly well that he was the son of Dronacharya. Krishna also knew him to be so, but both of them condemned the murderer without consideration of his being the son of a Brahmana. According to revealed scriptures, a teacher or spiritual master is liable to be rejected if he proves himself unworthy of the position of a guru or spiritual master. A guru is called also an acharya, or a person who has personally assimilated all the essence of Shastras and has helped his disciples to adopt the ways. Ashwatthama failed to discharge the duties of a Brahmana or teacher, and therefore he was liable to be rejected from the exalted position of a Brahmana. On this consideration, both Lord Sri Krishna and Arjuna were right in condemning Ashwatthama. But to a good lady like Draupadi, the matter was considered not from the angle of Shastric vision, but as a matter of custom. By custom, Ashwatthama was offered the same respect as offered to his father. It was so because generally the people accept the son of a Brahmana as a real Brahmana by sentiment only. Factually, the matter is different. A Brahmana is accepted on the merit of qualification and not on the merit of simply being the son of a Brahmana. But in spite of all this, Draupadi desired that Ashwatthama be at once released, and it was all the same a good sentiment for her. This means that a devotee of the Lord can tolerate all sorts of tribulation personally, but still such devotees are never unkind to others, even to the enemy. These are the characteristics of one who is a pure devotee of the Lord. Verse and translation one more time. Uvacha cha sahantyasya bandhananayanam sati mucyatam esha brahmano nitaram guru. She could not tolerate Ashwatthama's being bound by ropes, and being a devoted lady, she said, "Release him, for he is a Brahmana, our spiritual master." Namam Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine, Namaste Saraswate Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, Paschatya Desha Tarine, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So to punish or not to punish, based on Shastras, based on customs, what do we do? So Ashwatthama was a Brahmana himself, and he was a son of a Brahmana, Dronacharya. Lako im da to na stranu. Hvala. Or maybe you should put it in between so Maharaj doesn't have to see me. So Ashwatthama was the son of Dronacharya. Dronacharya was a Brahmana who was also teaching Kshatriyas. Brahmanas were teaching Kshatriyas, even the martial arts. And Ashwatthama was also a Brahmana. However, neither Krishna nor Arjuna accepted him as such based on his behavior and activities. He beheaded 5 12-year-old boys while they were sleeping, which was despicable even for the demons in his camp. Even Duryodhana was like, whoa, gross. His father rejected that. So neither Krishna nor Arjuna accepted him as a Brahmana, so they bound him by ropes and brought him to be punished. And Draupadi, being soft-hearted, didn't want him to be bound by ropes. So now we come to the point of compassion and justice. We discussed it yesterday a little bit. In Mahabharata, Bali Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj speak about compassion or forgiveness and justice. And Bali Maharaj tells him that you cannot use either one all the time. So the real art is how to balance the both. And yesterday after the lecture I discussed a little bit with Ananta Prabhu how is that relevant to us today in ISKCON. Because ISKCON has laws, but ISKCON doesn't have a judicial system because ISKCON has no judicial power. ISKCON has no power to punish someone, for example, by sending someone to prison. ISKCON didn't build a single prison, as far as I know. There's a prison ministry, but it has other purpose, not putting people there, but going there and preaching to people. So how to balance things, especially when ISKCON's laws do not align with the government's laws locally. When ISKCON considers something to be abused by the local, but the local laws do not, or vice versa. ISKCON doesn't consider something to be abused, but the local laws do. So, it's a subject matter to be discussed, and it's a subject matter that should be discussed with devotees who are trained locally in professional law. Since before the COVID, there's a body formed to assist the GBC, the body of devotees who are professional lawyers. And they had a couple of conferences already in order to assist the GBC in making the decisions even more proper than they already are. So it's it's a subject matter, For example, if ISKCON's law says slapping your wife is an abuse, but the local law says that is not, what to do in such a situation? Do we separate from the local law, or do we follow it, or in some cases yes, in some cases no? What do we do? Is it something completely separated from the legal law? Like, for example, Muslims have Sharia law, and they practice it underground in the countries where it's not allowed. Like, for example, there are hundreds of Sharia laws, underground Sharia laws in Great Britain. And then they do some punishment. They cannot imprison anyone, but they do. There are murders and there are beatings. So, I don't know. What shall we practice in ISKCON? If someone beats his wife, do we turn him into the police? Do we beat him up? Do we throw him out? What's the balance? And balance is something that's ever changing. It cannot be something fixed all the time, but it's something that should be discussed and changed and upgraded as we go on. One day, Srila Prabhupada did say that his books would be the law books of mankind for the next 10,000 years. He said that more than once, and this mostly means spiritual law books, but it is not excluded that Srila Prabhupada's books could be used as law books for making actually laws. When devotees become a majority in some country, they can vote the laws in, the laws for banning slaughterhouses, abortions, prostitution, alcohol sales. Like, for example, in the American state of Utah, Mormons are in majority, and they made it a law that there is no smoking allowed anywhere on the public premises. You light up a cigarette in the street and you can be arrested and fined. So they have that power there. So when Himalayan Indian state of Manipur became devotional, when the king became a devotee, couple of generations after Lord Chaitanya, he became Gaudiya Vaishnava, the follower of Lord Chaitanya. He made it into law that everyone had to be devotee and everyone had to wear tilak. And you were bound to be punished by law if you didn't follow the king's order. There were different waves of these things coming and going, so. You know. But here there is also, Srila Prabhupada also discussed the matter of qualification, not being born as a Brahmana, because Dharma Shastras describe how many, 20 plus or 30 plus samskaras one has to undergo after being born as a Brahmana in order to become a full-fledged qualified Brahmana. You know, how many familial Brahmanas do that in India? You know, I don't know. Maybe not many. But Brahmana in India has mostly become a caste, not completely, but mostly, and you know, higher caste, and then there are lower castes, and you know, and then castes where, you know, the varnas, 4 varnas became 4 castes, and then there were, you know, subcaste and subcaste and sub-subcastes, and you know, during the time of British rule of India, some British gentleman wrote a book about Indian castes, and he counted more than 2,500 of them. All, of course, being blessed by the British government. And just the other day, I was reading an article in an Indian magazine about one subcaste that cleans the sewers. I don't think there were sewers in India 500 years ago, but now we have caste that cleans the sewers. And in Mayapur some years ago, I saw a man, skinny man, putting gamsha on and diving into the sewer in front of the, in ISKCON Mayapur, diving in to unclog it. And I was like, what? He dives into the poop and everything? But that's their caste. And apparently they're not allowed to do anything else in the caste system. And last year, a couple of hundred of such people drowned while doing that. In Krishna consciousness, there's no such a thing as caste. What, you know, we all do some things, and we may have our varna according to our activities and our qualifications, but devotees higher than a brahmana, meaning we don't take these things into consideration. We don't discriminate against devotees based on their job. Of course, if job is not sinful, if someone works as a, I don't know, butcher and is a devotee, I mean, he can practice Krishna consciousness as a butcher, but you know, not really recommended. He can chant, he can do some service, but most probably not going to be able to worship the deities or receive the initiation, you know, until he starts following the principles. And Srila Prabhupada does mention, I think in the 4th canto, in one purport, what is considered to be meat eating, you know, breeding the animals, killing, transporting, preparing, serving, buying, selling, cooking. Eating, yeah, thank you. Eating by yourself, on your own, or someone else feeding you. Because, you know, I'm not, there's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati used some example. There was a man, someone else was holding a cigarette or marijuana, and he was smoking for his hand, and it counted as not in his head. And you said, oh, but I was not smoking. Why? Because somebody else was holding it. You know, it's like in Croatian there is a statement. You know, there are 2 guys stealing, and one is holding a sack open, other guy is taking things, putting them in the sack. and the police catches them, and in the court, the other guy who was holding the sack said, I was not stealing, I was just holding the sack. So sometimes that's used like jokingly or sarcastically in Croatia. So who's the Brahmana? And Krishna and Arjuna reject Ashwatthama as Brahmana. You don't act like a Brahmana, you don't behave like a Brahmana, obviously you don't have qualities of a Brahmana, so you're not accepted as a Brahmana. It's as simple as that. And for us in ISKCON, just having a Brahmin thread and having received second initiation does not make us automatically a Brahmanas, because we need to have qualifications, so we need to act like Brahmanas, behave like Brahmanas. Not that we behave like common materialists, but we hide behind Krishna consciousness, which sometimes can happen. Devotees can behave in all sorts of ways, not nice ways, but because I'm a devotee, if you criticize my activities, you're a Vaishnava Paradi. No, sorry. Your activities determine your level in Krishna consciousness, and you should be accepted or not accepted accordingly. And here Srila Prabhupada gives example that Brahmana and also Guru or Acharya should be rejected if he is not qualified. Where's that? A teacher or spiritual master is liable to be rejected if he proves himself unworthy of the position of a guru or a spiritual master. There's a verse about this in the Mahabharata, that if guru is not behaving properly, one should reject one's guru. Not that, I've seen my spiritual master in ISKCON, he scratched behind his left ear using his right hand, and there's some obscure rule in some obscure shastra that says that you shouldn't do that, and therefore I'm going to reject that atheist. No, come on, Even we have the structure of authorities in ISKCON, and if something is being done wrong, we just report it. If there are some mistakes or some minor wrongdoings, that can be corrected by the proper authorities, not that, we go online and we launch a campaign against the demons in the garb of gurus, come on. But we have examples of gurus being rejected for not behaving properly. In Srimad Bhagavatam, we have Bali Maharaj rejecting the instruction of Shukracharya because instruction was not proper. And in the more recent history, we have the example of Bhaktivinoda Thakur rejecting his Diksha Guru, Bipin Bihari Goswami. He was not a Goswami by initiation, he was a familial guru. He appeared in the lineage coming from Vamshivadananda Thakur. He was born from a devotee father, and then he was given as a son for an adoption to, I can't remember, Vishnu Priya or Janava Mata, and then he served Vishnu Priya, and after Vishnu Priya passed away, he worshipped her deity, I think that's Dhameshwar Mahaprabhu in Navadvip, and lineage comes from him, and I believe he came from Vrindavan to the place, to West Bengal, and started worshipping his Krishna Balaram deities in the jungle, in the forest, and the tiger lived in that jungle. So some local people informed the king that there is a sadhu living in the jungle with his deities, and there's a tiger in the jungle. So the king immediately took his army, went to the jungle and killed the tiger, and became a disciple of the sadhu, and that's how the lineage there began. However, after some generations, this spiritual lineage became the familial lineage, and they believe that they can initiate, that they are gurus born in Brahminical families, and therefore they are qualified to be gurus, and no one else is. And in 1911, they have a how do we call it? gathering, a meeting for several days in a place called Baligai in southern West Bengal, close to the city of Egra. And they discussed for several days who's qualified to be a guru among the followers of Lord Chaitanya, and the conclusion was only those born in the Brahminical families, nobody else. And they said that Narottam Das Thakur and Raghunath Das Goswami were wrong to accept disciples because they were not from Brahminical families, but they are anywhere lower because Lord Chaitanya proved that by giving his Brahminical followers Shalagram Shilas, whereas to all the others he would give Govardhan Shila because it's the lower form of worship. You know, some really silly argument. Okay, there's a biography of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati called Saraswati Jayashri, composed during his life, presented to him as a Vyasa Puja gift. He read it, corrected some minor things, and it was published. And in there, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati states that while he was a child, he observed Bhaktivinoda Thakur's guru, Bipin Bihari Goswami, chewing pan and smoking tobacco. He stopped doing that due to the influence of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but after some months he resumed doing that. And that's why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wrote an article about Jagannath Das Babaji, but there's a sub-chapter about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he writes that wanting to show the mercy to the common materialist and wanting to bring him to the righteous path, Bhaktivinoda Thakur accepted as his spiritual master someone who was not qualified to be his disciple. After some time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur grew indifferent to that sense gratifier and took shelter of Jagannath Das Babaji. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when this guy and his group, the village is called Bagnapada because we remember there was a tiger in the jungle, and in Bengali it's called Bag. So Bagnapada, so place where the tiger was. It's a famous seat. There's also a seat of the Vaishnava Bagnapada, Shripad Bagnapada. I actually visited it last year. And there's also an academic book written about them, published by an academic publisher in Kolkata in Bengali book. And they had this meeting, this Samilan, where they decided who was to be guru. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's been some years, it's been like about 15 years since Bhaktivinoda Thakur already withdrew from his guru. And he was doing bhajan in Jagannath Puri. If you go to Jagannath Puri, his bhajan kutir was exactly in the place where ISKCON has the temple now. That's why in ISKCON's temple room there's a deity of Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhakti Kuti. And then when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was informed about the conclusions of this meeting, which were printed in a book actually, I dare saying that he lost it. So he immediately organized another gathering, another sabha of proper Vaishnavas, and invited them to deliver 3 days, lectures about who the proper guru is. And then when the gurus from Bagnapada heard that, they got angry. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur invited them as guests to appease them. However, as the date for the beginning of the sabha neared, Bhaktivinoda Thakur developed a severe case of arthritis. So he couldn't walk, he couldn't travel. There are some beliefs that arthritis wasn't that severe, but he didn't want to confront publicly his now already ex-guru. Because Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a highly cultured Bengali gentleman. So he didn't go into these conflicts. So instead of going there, he sent his son, whose name was? Yeah, but at that time he was called Siddhanta Saraswati, and he delivered a 2-day talk. First day he glorified Brahmanas from the scriptures, and all of these Brahmanas are like, yes, a flood of nectar for our ears. But the next day he delivered the lecture with all the references from the Shastras about how Vaishnavas are higher than Brahmanas and they can be gurus. So this talk of his, these 2 lectures were later transcribed by his disciples and published as a book called Brahmana and Vaishnava, and we have it translated into English. And 2 books were published from this Sammelan, Conclusions and his book. So there was no communication anymore between Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his former guru. So that was 1911. In 1914, Bhaktivinoda Thakur left this world, and in 1916, his guru wrote an article for they had a magazine being published called Gauranga Sevaka, and his guru wrote an article, and in this article he rejects Bhaktivinoda Thakur as his disciple. He rejects Yoga Pit as the appearance place of Lord Chaitanya, which basically means he rejects the authority of our Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Gorkishore Das Babaji, Jagannath Das Babaji. I mean, he could have lived in an illusion of having some relationship with Bhaktivinoda Thakur left, but now, spiritually speaking, he shoots himself in the foot by rejecting Bhaktivinoda Thakur and rejected him publicly. Bhaktivinoda Thakur rejected him silently, not wanting to insult him, but he insults a great acharya. We have the story around the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's initiation. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was around 6. They lived in the place called Narail, which is in the present-day Bangladesh, close to Indian border. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was sent there by the government to work, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was there. Bimal Prasad. Oh yeah, by the way, when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati delivered these lectures, Brahmana and Vaishnava, from Siddhanta Saraswati, he became Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. They gave him this title. Interestingly enough, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's guru and the gurus from the Bhagnapada awarded him the title Bhaktivinod, and he kept using it for the rest of his life. So anyway, around the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's initiation, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was around 6. They lived in Narail, and Bipin Bihari Goswami visited them. And all of a sudden, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur paid obeisances to him, and Bipin Bihari Goswami put his foot on Bhaktivinoda Thakur's head. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur got up, he rushed out to bring the paraphernalia for worshipping him, or to feed him something. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, little Bimal Prasad, 6 years old, was there looking at him. And he said, "Do you know who my father is?" And then, without waiting for an answer, he said, "My father is a Mahabhagavata, a perfect devotee, the most exalted. Do you really believe that you have the sufficient spiritual power to put your foot on his head?" At that moment, Bhaktivinoda Thakur walks back in, and Bipin Bihari Goswami looks at him and says, "Your son is so bold to the point of being rude." And later on, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati virtually paid no heed to Bipin Bihari Goswami nor his group. And they were completely separated from them. And in some articles, without mentioning the name directly, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati rejected Bipin Bihari Goswami and explained how Bhaktivinoda Thakur did so. So this story, this historical pastime has mostly gone unnoticed in the annals of ISKCON and ISKCON history because it hasn't been translated from the hundreds of articles that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wrote in Bengali and published in his magazine Gaudiya, but hopefully soon. There are some fragments here and there. There was actually one, about 10 years ago or maybe more, one Maharaj from Gaudiya Math retyped all of these articles that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wrote in Bengali in the Gaudiya magazine, and he published it as a large book, like almost 1,000 pages, maybe even more, in Bengali. So hopefully, we could have some Bengali translators translating so much nectar. And there's so much history in these articles. As a matter of fact, one of his final instructions, before leaving, he gathered disciples and he recited his final instructions, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and those were published actually. And one of the instructions was study the Gaudiya magazine, because there's so much in there. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is responsible for publishing more than 100,000 pages of materials. Besides his books, also these 7 magazines that he was publishing in 5 different languages. So we can see from the example, okay, let's just mention the ISKCON history, because we had gurus who fell down, we had sannyasis who fell down. Some fell down from their position as a guru or as a sannyasi, but continued with their devotional service, and whereas others fell from Krishna consciousness or left ISKCON, and then some disciples followed them, whereas other disciples stayed in ISKCON. There was a big topic about the reinitiation. Do we need reinitiation? No reinitiation? What do we do? Different arguments were presented. If spiritual master was proved to be unqualified to continue performing his service as a spiritual master, and this was confirmed by the ISKCON authorities, then disciple has all right to withdraw from such a spiritual master. Not that someone was writing some garbage on the internet and therefore spiritual master is fallen. No, sorry, anyone can write any nonsense on the internet, and people write about so many nonsensical things on the internet, so just because someone wrote some garbage on the internet about some of his spiritual master does not automatically make it true, because some people deliberately invent things and forge things in order to put somebody down. When you're nobody in ISKCON, nobody cares. As soon as you have some position in ISKCON, there's a target on your back or on your forehead or your chest, and everyone starts shooting at you. So you have to develop a thick skin if you want any position in ISKCON. You have to be either really surrendered or really advanced or really crazy, or a combination of those. Sometimes, people criticize, you enjoy so many benefits. Yeah, but the trouble and the headaches you get from having a position in ISKCON far outweigh any benefits you may get, or you didn't get, or you may get. Anyway, so qualified guru, qualified brahmana, and unqualified, we don't accept, we reject, we withdraw from them. And in ISKCON we had a history of removing them. And we have an example of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who rejected his spiritual master in a cultured manner by quietly withdrawing from him and not putting anything in public. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati spoke something stronger, but it seems he didn't mention names. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati anyway had no relationship with Bipin Bihari Goswami. And just one more point, in his biography, Saraswati Jayashri, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also mentions how he witnessed Bipin Bihari Goswami forging a book. He took palm leaves, ink, wrote a book, and signed some author 500 years ago trying to sell it, putting the philosophy of the Bhagnapada Goswamis in there and trying to prove it as the proper philosophy, which was not uncommon thing to do in Bengal after Lord Chaitanya. Anyway, questions, comments, corrections, critiques, conflicts?
I don't think that the children of Draupadi are all 12 years old. They're all different ages.
Oh, they were different ages.
And not only that, but as far as I know, they all fought on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Therefore, they were at least 16, if not more than that. All of them.
Abhimanyu
was 16.
was 16.
16. But he was a grandson.
Grandson?
Abhimanyu was Subhadra.
Arjuna and Subhadra.
Yeah, Arjuna and Subhadra.
So he was...
Oh, I guess he was his son.
He was son.
But not Draupadi.
Parikshit was grandson. Yeah. And these 5 were different ages.
Yeah, they're different because every year the Pandavas, one of the Pandavas would live with Draupadi.
Okay, so 5 years difference.
But they're at least 16. They all fought on the battle of Kurukshetra.
Yeah. So if they fought in the battle of Kurukshetra, do we report that to the Child Protection Office because Pandavas engaged their underage children in fighting, or?
Sure, of course.
They can bring it up to Arjuna and other Pandavas.
But some of them were more than...
Some were older. Thank you. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samavita Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.
Nije prevod.